was really captivated by this myself, and having had mathematicians in both my parents and my grandparents, I'm a little bit acquainted with thinking in higher dimensional spaces. But quite frankly, while I can just about visualize a cube or a sphere in 4 dimensions, getting up into 8-dimensional spaces is definitely something else. And so what we're seeing, it's also a philosophical thing. It's one of these areas for me where mathematics and philosophy intertwine completely. We're looking at a 2-dimensional, because we're looking at it on a screen, projection, if you like, of a 3-dimensional projection of an 8-dimensional object, which itself is projected onto the plane we're standing on as a 2-dimensional representation.
Yes.
Which we can experience in a virtual 3 dimensions because we're in a virtual world. Hey!
Yeah, that is probably one of the best explanations I've heard for it for a while. It is the level of comprehension required to fully conceptualize what it is we're standing on is quite extreme. I would, if you understand the mathematics behind it, come and marvel at the representation that is before you. If you are a complete novice and noob who doesn't really understand much more than basic mathematical concepts, come and marvel at it for its beautiful artistic representation. It's an amazing piece of work, and it's stunning stuff.
It's come and marvel at its 7 simplex and 7 orthoplex facets. Absolutely.
There's some other stuff around here too that is very beautiful. There's some constructions on the next grid over that are also by Wizzy, I think. Can you tell us anything about those?
Those are some slightly more simplistic polyhedra, and there is also a slightly less detailed version of the E8 Polytope on the adjacent simulator.
Right.
And it's certainly the more basic polyhedra. The math required to generate an object of that kind of complexity is obviously a lot more simple, and at that point you're becoming closer to a level of mathematical knowledge and ability that would be present in, say, in the British scheme of things. So if you're looking at your A-level students, I think possibly at that stage, maybe GCSE, but I think probably more like the A-level, and maybe onto university kind of level of aptitude and knowledge. But I think that it just looks fantastic to see. I'm a big lover of symmetry. I love things that are precise and accurate, and when I try and build things, I like to make sure that everything is symmetrical. I'm just sticky like that. I love doing that myself. I don't like to align things visually, and I like to make sure it's precise. But seeing someone doing that with mathematics and scripting is fantastic. So there are people on this grid who have created this, and it's mostly been Wizzy and Desdemona Enfield, who is a friend of Wizzy from Second Life, who is also on this grid a lot, and between the two of them they've done some amazing work in just making this more friendly for people who don't perhaps grasp the slightly more complicated arithmetic and equations required to generate these kind of objects.
Right. I've been reading Wizzy's blog, which has some fascinating articles. A recent one is about the myths of immersion, of immersing yourself in a 3D world. But I've got to say that standing here, this is so awesome. In itself, it shows the value of immersion in education. Peter Stimberg had a comment on Wizzy's blog that when I was in school, the highlights were when we got shown educational videos. I would hope for today's kids, the highlights will be when they enter the virtual world to explore Schliemann's Troy.
I spoke to some students today. I had the pleasure of meeting some students face to face today who have used. They've used Second Life a lot for building. the building on Second Life and OpenSim, very similar, obviously. Their feeling of immersion and their feeling of working together in the virtual space, you could see it on their faces. They really, really loved being in the virtual space. They had this absolute sense of joy, wonder, enthusiasm, and just that feeling of then they can go home and they can chat to their friends and carry on when they get out of the school environment. And they're doing that because they love it so much. And it's given them something really fun and different to work with. So the potential of doing this is just immense.
Absolutely, it's just really exciting, isn't it? And of course, just a few weeks ago, Saffia and I visited the recreation of a house in Pompeii, recreated by the Victorians in the Crystal Palace in 1854. So it's like two sort of levels of indirection, so to speak.
Love it.
And looking at two different sorts of a 21st century and a 19th century immersive environment. And that's the sort of thing you can do in a virtual environment, and why virtual worlds are so important, in my view, certainly in educational possibilities.
Absolutely agree.
Right. And now back to the studio. I thought that was absolutely fascinating.
Yes, it really was, and many more prims than you could rub together in Second Life, and such a wonderful subject as well. And there's some really great stuff, and all this multi-dimensional stuff is really amazing and fascinating. And there's lots more to Reaction Grid, lots more projects, and we'll have a look at a couple more. But first, we're going to take a short break.
So don't go away.